Hey, this is Madeline Sklar.
And Suze Cooper, and you're listening to All Things Audio. First up today, we're going to talk about ticketed spaces. Madeline, this is really exciting, isn't it? They've started to roll out ticketed spaces for some iOS users. You've got 3 spaces a week that you're doing at the moment. Is this something that you're looking forward to seeing, to using?
I would love to experiment because I'm all about experimenting and trying things and see, is it something I want to use or not? And I think this is awesome that Twitter has worked so hard to come up with a way to monetize your room and spaces. I don't have it yet. You know, there's a way to apply when you're on your phone and you go over to your settings and privacy. If you have this availability, not everybody does. And I believe it's just like certain countries as well. I know the U.S. is one of the countries, but you will see once you're in settings and privacy, towards the top under account, it should say monetization. That's how you know you can apply. If you have that, tap on it and just go through the process. You can apply for ticketed spaces and super follows. Now, I applied back when that became available several months back. Now, I got the email that says, hey, thank you for applying, but you didn't make the first round. So I don't know how many people made the first round. I think it's a very, very small group. So if you applied, you can always go back to that monetization link on your phone and it'll give you the status. So mine says waiting because that's the status. I'm still waiting. But some people have it. Host Celine Main has it. And I can't wait to see how people are going to use it because you can charge for your rooms. And you and I would love to experiment to see about maybe having a paid version of All Things Audio where maybe we turn it like into a masterclass or something. Don't you think that would be cool?
That would be really, really cool. I mean, just like you, I'm on the waiting list. So I'm waiting as well. I've done the application, but nothing through for me yet. I guess any of these features that involve money, they're not going to roll them out to huge numbers at a time. If it all goes wrong, it would be an awful headache for them, wouldn't it? So I'm guessing they're wanting to really nail this before they roll it out wider. But essentially the idea is that hosts will be able to charge between, it says here, $1 and $999 for their ticketed rooms, and also be able to set a room size cap. So this could be used in so many different ways. I mean, we could be looking at spaces conferences, I guess, of kind of hundreds of people, or even those more kind of intimate masterclasses, as you're saying, Madeline, like an All Things Audio mastermind, something like that, which is kept to a smaller group so everyone gets a chance to speak, that kind of thing. So again, really kind of widening out for creatives what could be possible in Twitter Spaces, but also adding this layer of monetization, which is really interesting and intriguing to see how people will use it. The Verge is the article that we're looking at today, and Madeline's kindly popped that up in the nest already. So if you want to go along and bookmark that, then you can, or you can check it out in our Twitter moment, which will be out after we've recorded this episode. But it says here that the test group participants will initially keep 97% of the money they make after the fee Apple and Google charge for in-app purchases. And Twitter is going to look to increase its cut if a user makes a total of $50,000 across their earnings on the app. I mean, that's quite a threshold.
That is, but you have to keep in mind that when either Apple or Google takes their cut, depending on you know which provider you're using, whether it's iOS or Android, they're going to take 30%. So you just have to keep in mind a big chunk is coming right off the top before Twitter gets the rest and then takes their 3%. At least it's 3% because it was initially going to be 20%. That would add up really quick. And then when everything's said and done, you're not really making that much. But you know, something that'll be interesting with this, Suze, right now, and I know we're going to talk about this a little later because you saw some interesting tweets about this. Right now, there is no private rooms for spaces at the moment. But the minimum charge you could do for a room is $1. So you actually could maybe say, hey, I want to do a private room and only charge, you know, admission, like you can decide how many tickets. So maybe you just want to have a small private room, 10 people, you charge $1 and use that as a way, and only just tell specific people like the 10 people, like, hey, I've come up with a way where we can have a private room together. It's $1. Here's the link. So you don't publicize the link. You like give it to specific people. Just popped in my head, like that would be an interesting way to have a private room while we're currently in a place where we don't have private rooms.
Yeah, it definitely would. As you say, it's something that has cropped up this week. the whole monetization thing has actually come along kind of in tandem with Spaces, really. It's like they've always suggested that it would be something that people could do, which I think is really forward thinking of them, that people were going to go out there and try and do this anyway. So why don't they kind of try and bring it in-house and get a cut while they're doing it, I guess. And for podcasters who are considering kind of repurposing Spaces a little bit like we do, you know, having a podcast isn't a free activity anymore. Yes, there are free tiers of hosting, etc. But if you're really doing this seriously week after week, there is a certain amount of cost that's kind of involved in that. So potentially this is a way that podcasters could make back some of that money and actually help it to pay for itself, if you like. So it's just another thing that we've got in our back pocket to add to sponsorship or advertising or sponsored reporting. So, yeah, another great thing to think about. But what we really wanted to do this week was to use a Twitter poll. Were we going to ask people in the space what they thought about ticketed spaces?
Absolutely. So we have a Twitter poll. It's in the nest. For those that will be listening to the podcast version, it will already have ended by then. So we're not going to put it in the show notes. But we're curious. Those of you that are here. Now, mind you, I tweeted this a little while ago because I wanted to go ahead and have it in my Twitter streaming. We already have 21 votes, and it is overwhelmingly no. Would you pay to get into ticketed spaces? Your choice is yes, no, or maybe. I put the maybe in there because there's going to be times where, you know, you might say to yourself, well, if it's the right room at the right price, maybe I would. But there are people that are like yes and no. And interesting that most people are doing a hard no. They are not interested. Interesting, right?
Yeah. I'm really surprised at that.
I think people are quick to say that because I think the psychology I'm thinking of is probably, why would I pay for something? Twitter's free and should be free. Everything should be free. Why should I pay for that? But I think they would be swayed if it was the right person or the right people teaching the right kind of room at a cost that they're okay with. Then I think they would probably be a yes or maybe. So it would be hard for me to give a firm yes or no. For me, it would really depend on, well, you know, I think I would. I think I would be a yes because I would be thinking, yeah, I don't mean like everybody, but if it was the right room, the right person, right cost, sure. I think it'll be interesting. I mean, how is that different than signing up for some kind of training? You know, but it's an audio version. There's still ways to have audio but still teach. I mean, before we had webinars, and, you know, I've been doing digital marketing for 25 years. So mind you, before we had video online, we had to come up with unique ways to train. I used to do lots of online training, well, in a way online, using the phone. And it was a service I used to use called freeconference.com. It was a conference call. And that was really big, like in the early 2000s. Before we had the ability to teach in a webinar, a live webinar type format where people could actually see you or see your PowerPoint presentation. So it was strictly audio. And I used to do really well with that. I mean, I used to do a monthly one where I'd bring on a guest and have them come talk with me. So basically it was a podcast before podcasting was out, before it was available. So I think you can still teach and train without the visual, but like we share visuals when we do this because we put things in the nest. For people that are listening later in the podcast version, we make sure we put links to it on the show notes. So there are ways around that, the visual aspect, I think. So I think ticketed spaces could be very, very cool. It's going to be interesting to see how people decide to use it. And I will definitely experiment and try a variety of things to see what resonates with people. How would they like to do this?
Yeah, and I'd encourage everyone that's in our space at the moment to go along and take part in that poll. And we'll be reporting back on that before we close out on the podcast later on.
And I'm watching it in real time. We've already gotten way more maybes now. So the no's have gone down to 59%. The maybes are at 25. The yeses are still at 14. So super interesting. So thank you all for taking a moment to do that so we can kind of gauge what people think of it.
Yeah, and I also wonder if it kind of matters if people are voting and they've never really been interested in Twitter Spaces. There's a difference between never been in a space, being a listener quite often in a space, or being a host. As a host, I would definitely pay for someone else's content. If I was confident of the value that I was going to get back from them. As you say, Madeline, if you know who it is that you're going to be listening to, and you know their content generally, then yeah, I would definitely pay, because I know the work that goes on behind the scenes to put something of value together like this. So yeah, I think it really does matter how close you are to spaces potentially as to what you might answer as well. So discoverability is something that we talk about every week. Spaces are now saying they're going to start showing which spaces your friends are attending. So basically, if you're following someone and they are in a space, we should start seeing that show up on our timeline. This is a super idea, don't you think?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, we're both big fans of discoverability because, it still is a work in progress with spaces. Clubhouse has it down really well, but with spaces, until everyone has a discoverability tab, it's not that easy to find rooms. So I have the discoverability tab. It has made it so much better for me as the whole spaces experience. But why not come up with other ways, even when people do have access to that? Why not keep coming up with ways to make rooms? I'm still advocating for them to incorporate Twitter topics into the algorithm for discoverability of spaces. And I really hope, every chance I get, I keep telling them, please do this. But I love the idea that there's a way to discover rooms and spaces. As we know right now, the Fleets Bar that's now been renamed to the Space Bar. If somebody is either speaking or hosting a room and you follow them, you'll see them. You should see them at the top of your Space Bar. But now they're going this step further, and they're experimenting, and it's not for everyone. Some iOS and some Android, you would be able to see also if someone you follow is a listener in a room. And I think that is super interesting. But I also know that some people are thinking, wait a minute, that kind of feels a little weird with privacy. So I'm going to share another tweet that actually came out directly from Spaces, where they show a screenshot of how you can adjust that in your settings if you don't want that to be seen. Because some people don't want that.
That's really important, that we can choose to turn it off if we don't want people to see which spaces we're listening to or where we are. And there is that option to do that within the settings and the privacy menu. So I think that's super important as part of the feature.
It really is. And it's just as simple as going to privacy and settings, and it's kind of hidden in there. The screenshot makes it sound like it's just right in the privacy and settings. I had to dig around a bit to find it. And I'm on iOS. I'm on an iPhone. So when I go to settings, so I'm on my iPhone. I go to, get into where settings and privacy. If you're not sure how to do that, when you're on the home screen, the very top left, you'll in real small picture of yourself, tap on that, and that opens up the little sidebar menu, and scroll down until you see settings and privacy. And once you're in there, then tap on privacy and safety. And once you're in there, you can scroll down, at least on an iPhone. I'm not sure with Android, because I'm not sure with this screenshot, because again, it makes it sound like I don't know. I was a little confused the first time I saw it, because it looks different on my screen than what this screenshot shows. But once I'm in this privacy and safety, then I scroll down, I do see a toggle on off for spaces, and it says allow followers to see which spaces you're listening to. I have mine turned on, but it says underneath it, keep in mind that even with this setting turned off, you will be visible to everyone when you're in a space. Your followers can always see what spaces you're hosting, co-hosting, or speaking in. So I think what they mean by that is, if you're in a room and somebody comes in the room, yes, they're going to see you. This is not going to take you out of this. It's only if your followers won't necessarily see you in the space bar, when they're just seeing, up top, like right now we're all in this room, and if you're following those that are speaking, like either Suze or I, then we should show up in your space bar right now. But let's say you have this turned on and you're just a listener, it might show up for some people. They might see our room going on right now, and because you're listening, it could show up in their feed. So it's just a way for more discoverability. I don't think there's anything wrong, but some people might not like that as a privacy issue. Totally respect that. So it's very easy to turn off.
Well, moving on, this week, as we mentioned earlier, there seems to have been a new fad happening on Spaces. I say new because I hadn't really been aware of it at all up until now. And then I've seen kind of 2, 3, 4 maybe 5 people tweeting about it, not experienced it myself. But what I'm talking about is people creating spaces that are for a private chat, a private conversation, and kind of using spaces as a bit of a phone call, I suppose. Now, the issue with this seems to be that other people don't necessarily realise that these are private spaces, if you like, and are kind of wandering into them and are being pushed out, I guess, and asked to leave. And in some cases, people are getting quite upset about it. Madeline, is this something that you've come across at all?
I've seen it a few times, and I was a little confused at first because I'm thinking, wait a minute, but these rooms are not private. You cannot have a private room, but they'll sometimes put in the title and say something like, private or something where it's like, and I'm like, well, okay, I won't tap on that room then. But yeah, I mean, from that tweet from Joe Mars, it sounds like some people are using it to save money with phone calls by just doing a room in Spaces and just trying to make it look like it's a private. Because in this tweet, they say, in quotes, private, do not enter. So I've seen a few variations of that a few times. So I just okay, obviously these people are trying to keep it private, even though technically it's not. So I'll just stay out. But interesting how Danny Singh from Twitter did a reply, which I added to the nest. We'll put it in the show notes as well, saying that, they plan to have private spaces at some point, but they're not there yet.
No, and again, we're putting 2 and 2 together and potentially coming up with 5, but maybe the ticketed spaces is part of that because, as we've said, you can cap that number, you can kind of set a price and perhaps lock it down a little bit more, or perhaps even it's something within super follows that might be rolled out. I mean, I know that's been rolled out kind of in the last hour or so. There are tweets flying about super follows. So, perhaps that's something that might be added on to do with spaces. But yeah, Danny says that private spaces are something that they're thinking about for the future, but not quite yet. So yeah, it's just interesting the different ways that people are finding to use spaces. And I guess if someone drops in on a space and you don't want them to be there, you can at least be kind to them and ask them to leave rather than being rude.
Absolutely. Be nice about it. And I think people would be respectful of that. Like, hey, we can't technically have a private room, but we're trying to kind of have a somewhat private conversation. But people are going to pop in. And I think there may be times where trying to put in the title to make it sound like, private, do not enter might get more people to what's this about? Let me just go in anyway. So it could totally backfire. I would kind of watch out for that.
Yeah, absolutely. Right. Let's talk analytics. Madeline, we've been so excited this week trying to figure out analytics and Diracon. We had a bit of a chat with host Celine about it last week, and since then we've both managed to sign up on the kind of trial version of the app. How are you finding it?
I love it. I am so glad host Celine told us about this last week. I loved how when he was here, he was using it because as long as you're a speaker, you don't necessarily have to be the host. But if you're like, I'm just co-host right now and it's letting me do it, but you're the host. So you will also get access to the recording afterwards, which is awesome. And I've been having a lot of fun playing with it. I used it for the first time on Saturday from my Twitter audits room. And I was blown away how I'm seeing the real-time insights. Like we've been on right now. This is what it's telling me right now. We've been on I know I started, if you were on a few minutes early, so yours will be a little different when probably depending on what time you started it, because it all depends on when you put in the URL. Mine says 28 minutes. We've had a maximum of 37 listeners, meaning at any given time, that's the most people in the room. But total listeners, because people come and go, is 91. And I love this because, when we're hosting our rooms, we can see okay, how many people are here? Let me tap on the little icon at the bottom, see how many hosts, co-hosts, a number of speakers, number of listeners. And you can gauge pretty quickly, but also in a blink of an eye, someone comes, someone leaves, and you cannot really keep track of that. And this is such a great way to get more of that information. Now, there's a free trial, a 1-week free trial. I'm doing the premium because I was looking at the different options of okay, which one would I actually pay for if I decide to keep it? And I didn't want the lowest one because it didn't have enough features. The highest one had a feature I didn't need, so I did the one in the middle, which I believe is $29 a month. And I was like, well, if it's really, really good, I might be willing to pay that. So I probably would. And I tell you what, all it took was one time on Saturday. I love this, and I will definitely pay to use this because after my Saturday room was over, not only to have the real-time stats, afterwards, it gave me a spreadsheet of everybody who was there, whether they were there the whole time or showed up for a minute. And it also keeps track, when you're in here, there's a history and, audience. And it's going to also keep track over time if people keep coming to your room. Like I just did one room, so it lets me know that they listened to that one room. But now, doing another room right now, when this is over, if some of you were here on Saturday with me and you're in this one now, it's going to let me know. And that's pretty cool. And then I can, download the spreadsheet if I want. So I'm super impressed. And then about 5 minutes after I finished the room on Saturday, the download file was available and done. Super fast, super easy. I'm impressed, Sue. So I think this is a great tool. I'm sure you and I will be promoting this quite a bit.
Yeah, I just think it's invaluable. I think the insights that it's giving there are they're gold. They're exactly what we were hoping and wishing for. And here they are in this third-party app. So at the moment, as a host, you need to copy and paste your space URL. Once you've set up your space, you need to copy and paste that URL into the app. And then, it starts to track it and give you, as Madeline says, this real-time data. And being able to return back to that data afterwards and make use of it is just really brilliant. So, really great. And I will look forward to continuing to test that out. And as you say, having a recording in there is also a really great feature. I mean, it seems to have covered pretty much every base. Really great to see that happening. Yeah, super excited about it. Hey, I just want to mention, I'm keeping track of my notifications while we're doing the room, and going back to the poll we did a little while ago, asking everybody, would you pay to get into a ticketed space? Interesting conversation going on. So Johnny Martinez had replied to my tweet and said, ticketed spaces would only work for big name celebrities. A normal person would never pay to hear spaces unless it's hosted by someone really famous. And then Ahmed replied to that tweet, and here's what he said, which I really love. And I know he's in here in the room with us right now, so hello. He says, I, on the other hand, would never pay to listen to someone famous, but I would pay for a space from someone who is hands down, expert who works for a living. So, there are going to be people that will pay when it's a celebrity, of course. You're always going to have that. But I agree with what he's saying. I think when it's someone who's an expert and you value their opinion, I think you would totally pay. They don't have to be a celebrity for that. And then he also said, P.S. I just found this tweet 57 seconds ago. He posted, P.S. I would pay to attend Madeline's Clar and at Big Ten Social, which is you, Suze, for sure. I wish Twitter would hurry up and introduce the feature because my debt to them is getting heavy and I don't like being a free rider. Thank you. That's so sweet. Appreciate that. Honestly, you all pay us back in spades by turning up every week. It is so lovely to see everybody in here. And I really feel like we're building such a lovely community. Thank you all for being here. When we say thank you, we mean it from the bottom of our hearts every single week.
Absolutely. And I'm going to just, DirectCon is because I see Angela tweeted and was asking what's the third-party app capturing the analytics. So it's called DirectCon. I didn't have time to put something to put in the nest, but I'm just going to go to their profile real quick and just post one of their tweets. Hopefully they have I'm going to put up their pinned tweet because it's a good one. And you all can check them out further from here. It's a really interesting tool, and they got a free trial going right now. So I immediately saw the value after using it for one room. I saw the value. But there's like 3 different levels of cost to pay, but the more you pay, the more features you get. So I would just take a look and see. When you're doing a free trial, don't always jump to do the lowest one, because if you're doing the lowest one but you want to try the other features, go ahead and it says you have a week and you can easily cancel. So I just went ahead and did the middle one because it's like, well, I want to try the features, but yes, I'd like to try it for free first, make sure I really want it. And I'm telling you, I was sold. But I'm also checking on their affiliate program because I would definitely be promoting this regularly. I only promote things that I only use myself or think are really worthwhile that people should use. I don't, even affiliate program or not. If I ever have an affiliate link, I guarantee you it's only something I would pay for myself. But yeah, super exciting to see where that goes. But we've got some Clubhouse news, interesting Clubhouse news, right?
Yes, Clubhouse. So I have indeed spent several hours this week on Clubhouse, which, as you will know if you listen to the podcast or in this space regularly, is something me and Madeline really hadn't been doing very much over the last few weeks and months. We'd sort of broken away from Clubhouse a little bit just because it really wasn't serving us the content over there. And we found our own little niche over here on Twitter Spaces, and we love all the features and the functions that Twitter Spaces offers. So what took me back to Clubhouse? Spatial audio took me back to Clubhouse. So they announced on August the 29th that spatial audio was coming to Clubhouse, was going to be rolled out across the iOS app. And basically this would mean that each speaker within a room has their own spatial position, so that when you're listening, you actually feel like you're more immersed in a conversation. So the idea is that it will give you a kind of more natural feeling to being involved in a conversation. Now, this is something that they've rolled out over 48 hours. And I spent quite some time in various rooms and actually found a few rooms and clubs over there that I really enjoyed, to the point that I sort of realised I wasn't sort of listening out for this spatial audio. So I kept having to drag myself back into okay, I'm listening for it and I'm listening for it and I'm not hearing it. I'm really disappointed, but I'm just not hearing it, and I don't know why. I don't know if it's because I'm expecting it to sound very different to the way that it does. You know, I'm someone who works with audio a great deal. I produce music and I do a whole heap of things. I've got all the different headphones. I've tried my AirPods. I've tried wired headphones. I've tried my monitors. And I just am not hearing this effect. I don't know. Other people on Twitter are definitely hearing it. They're telling me they're hearing it. They're telling me it's happening. Even the guy that was involved in the actual developing of it says, I've got the right version of the app. I'm using the right headphones and I'm in the right place and I should be hearing it. So potentially, as I said earlier to him today in a tweet, perhaps it is just so subtle and natural that it's not shouting, which is exactly the way that it should be. The idea of this is that it should make it feel more natural. So potentially I'm kind of listening for something that really isn't there. Certainly crosstalk seems to be a little easier maybe over there at the moment. So potentially that could be the effect it's having, that people are more in their own position within the audio and therefore it's not fighting when people talk over one another. So yeah, gimmick or really, really necessary. I'm really not sure. I'm not even sure that I can really hear it, but I would love to know if anyone has been on Clubhouse, if you've heard this particularly and what you think of it. Madeline, I'm fairly sure you haven't been over there, have you? You haven't heard it yet.
No, I haven't been on there since they released this. But I'm looking at their tweet, and I have it in the show notes in the Nest, but it'll also be in the show notes. That it also does say, because it's a threaded tweet, and in the second part of the tweet it says that you will not hear it if you're on stage, only when you're in the audience. So they're trying to make sure people know that. But interesting that you're not able to know. I mean, it sounds like it should be noticeable somewhat, right? I mean, that's so odd. Are they like doing some kind of rollout and it just hasn't made it to you, even though you have the latest version? It just seems strange.
This is what I wondered, whether or not perhaps I was in a control group or something like that. But apparently not. Apparently I should be able to hear it, but it's certainly not something that I'm hearing very obviously.
I'm curious with all of our live listeners, if anyone in here has heard it, does hear a difference, just put up an emoji real quick just so we can see if someone here, because not everybody can always come up and speak on stage with us, but I'm just curious if anyone in our room knows about this and has heard it and sees the difference. And I'm really curious. Now I need to go over there and go see if I notice, because I remember when I first got on Clubhouse back in December, the very first thing I realized was like, this audio is subpar. Like it's not, I would never use it for a podcast. Like it just was not quality audio. But then the first time I was in Spaces, that was the first thing in my mind was like, oh my God, this could sound great for a podcast because the audio is crystal clear. But yeah, this is definitely interesting for sure.
So I see that Morgan's actually in the space and we've actually exchanged quite a few tweets about this over the last few days.
Yeah, and Morgan's coming up to speak, so we'll love to hear what he has to say.
Hello, both.
Hi.
Hi there.
I've been listening to all of your shows on the podcast version, but this is the first time I've made you live, so glad to do that. Just wanted to say some things about the spatial audio. So Susie and I have been tweeting back and forth a little bit about this. And I've put in some good hours over the last couple of days listening to it. And I'm not sure what makes the difference here, but so I'm using AirPods Pro, which apparently it's a good way of showcasing it. So the effect is slightly stronger on that. But when I'm listening to it, it's very distinctive. It does feel natural. I wouldn't say it's overbearing, but you can absolutely hear speakers coming in from, the left of you, the right, slightly further away. And it's very much like being in a room with people. So they're obviously, slightly different positions from you. And one of the other interesting things it does is if somebody starts talking, that's the bit where you pick up the location. But as that person talks more, they're gradually phased towards the center of the soundscape. So if somebody, which does happen, if somebody is monologuing, then they won't always be coming from like far stage left. So I think Clubhouse have done their own implementation of spatial audio that is thinking about the dynamics of conversation and about subtly sort of bringing things more to the fore if somebody is expounding on an idea, or if there's a conversational back and forth, as you said, making it much easier to sort of interject and see the conversation bounce between people, as they say in popcorn style. So I think it's having this interesting effect on conversational dynamics. One of the things you picked up on is at the moment, this is not something that speakers can hear unless they're wearing wired headphones. So if you're wearing wired headphones, then you are supposed to hear it as a speaker. But I assume most people don't wear wired headphones. And that's because there's a limitation in the Bluetooth hands-free specification that they're working with Apple on changing, which is the limit there. So I thought originally it was a latency issue. You obviously want latency to be low between speakers. But so there is that. Yeah, I don't know if anyone else has heard it, because me just saying I've heard it is probably not very convincing. I'd love to hear if someone else has heard it too.
So real quick, you're saying that it's wired headphones only, not Bluetooth?
Yeah, if you're a speaker, wired headphones, you should be able to hear the effect. Everyone in the audience can hear the effect, no matter what kind of headphone they're using, wired or wireless. And it doesn't have to be an AirPods or AirPods Pro. I think it can be any Bluetooth headphone. It's even sort of tuned to work very well on a car stereo, where you have 4 speakers or more. So they've thought about all these different situations. But yeah, hopefully, apart from this limitation, there is no sort of latency issue for making this something that all speakers can hear. And I think that's going to be really important, because one of the real uses here, apart from raising the experience for the audience and certain accessibility bonuses here for being able to pick apart who's speaking, I think that's also very important, will be for moderators and hosts who will, once you can hear this interjection between people more clearly, the conversation becomes less stilted. So you're less concerned with watching for when someone unmutes their microphone or handing between people in quite a forced order way, which can happen on Clubhouse. So the moderator can have a more free-flowing, natural conversation, which I think is going to be really interesting.
That's so interesting. Thank you so much for sharing that, Morgan. I'm kind of at a bit of a loss with it. I mean, I like the fact that they've thought about it, and I love what you were saying there about the car speakers, like the idea that if you're listening on, something other than headphones, that this could have make a real difference to how you experience the sound. And just having thought about it, I think is really neat and really clever. And once again, kind of gives them a unique point. I mean, there are lots of these different social audio platforms that are popping up. If there weren't, we wouldn't have much to talk about on a Wednesday. So I'm grateful for them. But, each of them are going to need their own little niche. And Clubhouse has now gone out there and said, look, this is audio, and there are things you can do with audio to make it sound different and to really give a different experience. So I think it's really exciting that they've thought about it and they're looking into it. So it's really cool.
Yeah, thanks for sharing that.
Enrique, you have your hand up. Hello.
Hi, how are you, Sus and Madeline? This is very interesting. I have a question. I sent it to you, Sus, by the direct mail. Um, if Twitter is going to create or do something to promote these monetized spaces, since we are going to start to receive money, we are going to spend or invest in the in this promotion of our spaces. Do you know something about it?
I don't think we've heard anything particularly, but I guess it would make sense that they may well roll out something, particularly if they're going to take a cut of the profits, I guess. So I don't know, Madeline, what do you think?
Yeah, I imagine there will be something. Hoseline might have an inside scoop because he always knows, and he's a speaker, so I would love to see what he has to say because he always knows everything before it's public. He's like the Jane Wong, in Spaces, because he always knows what they're up to. Any thoughts, Hoseline?
Que pasa, Enrique? Thank you for bringing me up to speak. Long-time listener, first-time caller. No, just kidding. So I think that I'm not sure. They're the team tends to be very selective as to who they promote. They tend to promote a selective amount. I think the reasoning being, I guess, would be for them not to promote is if you were given the feature, you're already good at promoting. Otherwise, you wouldn't have had the feature. So I think that logic is what's being used or what can be used if Twitter Spaces or the team doesn't promote you, because they figured you've already developed such a following that we don't need to assist you in this way. This is just speculative, obviously, just by observing who they promote and who they don't promote and things of that nature. So
No,
I know
but
that.
my
Go ahead.
question is more if there are any way to pay to put like banners or something about MySpace.
Oh yeah, you could do that. You've had that capability since the beginning. So Andrew highlighted. I don't know, sure if he's here or not. If he's here, highlight him. But Andrew was able to tap into the ads network, the Twitter ads network, and he was doing it in a way that you can actually use the ad component and not pay for that ad, but you could pay for the ad and promote your space that way. I've actually had, and I think we all know a couple of people that have tested this out way back when, at least 2 months ago. So you're free to promote anything using the ads component that's already built into the application. So if you wanted to do that, you could do that right now.
Thanks for sharing with us. Hoseline, you're up next. What would you like to talk about?
So much to talk about, so little time. So I did test ticketed spaces. I did test the Diacom. Super follows were rolled out. One thing that I did notice from the Diacom is that if you have a ticketed space, the analytics don't show up, rightfully so. So there must be some sort of filter or protection for that. So I want to talk to them. I did a ticketed spaces, and we did have 5 winners to the app that we promoted. I interviewed Jamie, who was the founder of Social Opinions. And one of the things that I wanted to do with my ticketed spaces is that provide much more value from the investment in the space. So the space cost $3.99. I selected that because it was between 3 and 5, 4. So it was kind of corny, I know, but whatever. But the value that I was able to distill is the product cost $30. So just by entering in, you got $30 worth of free product for the month, and I have some other giveaways to add on to that later on. So yeah, there's a lot in so little time. So I would say that for anyone that's considering those super follows or ticketed spaces, my recommendation is always provide more value than you're charging to get in. And the last thing is that, on a side note, I think I talked about this before, but there was a TikToker. Her name was V Long. Hopefully, I'm pronouncing it correctly. She started 10 months ago with no TikTok account. Now from their creator account, she makes $250 to $300 per month from that creator account. But she charges $8,000 to $10,000 per post, sponsored posts. So the reason why I give this example is, generally speaking, these monetizational tools are just really a fraction of what you should be generating outside of the platform. So with TipJar, with Ticketed Spaces, and with Super Follows, they're not a really, you're not supposed to retire off of these things. Quite honestly, they're just a little bit more of a gated component that allows you to really monetize more on the back end. So if you have a strategy and you have offers in the back end, it's really designed for those type of creators. So that's just kind of my observation of the creator space, and specifically the features that are provided to the creators. You know, we're not counting on the features to generate money. We're just using it as more of a filter, as an FYI. Hopefully that was helpful.
It's really just like an additional revenue stream, not a sole revenue stream.
Correct. It's not just because you have the tip jar. That's not going. Your life is not going to be like, you're not going to be moving into the mansion next week.
It's a nice feature. Yeah, it's like buy me coffee, tool. It's just, it's a nice feature to have. It's not going to necessarily be life changing, but hey, when you're an entrepreneur, you're doing your own thing. It's all about multiple streams of income, and nothing wrong with having a few dollars come from a source like that, where if you didn't have that, it would be zero coming from it. So every little bit helps. Yeah, thanks for sharing all that. That's like some really helpful info. So thank you. And so you're saying with Ticketed Spaces, they do give you the option to offer some free tickets?
Yes, the way you do that is just you send them a DM. So if you look at, I created a video. I could post it if you want, but if not, basically.
Yeah, post it.
So I created a video that just kind of goes through all the different features of a ticketed space, from the creation of it, and also if you cancel it, what happens. And what ends up happening is everybody gets a refund on that space. So that's a very interesting thing. The other sticking point currently is that for those people that do a ticketed space and the space crashes, what happens? We need to figure that out, because so I posted it there. You can free invite via DM, max 5,000 tickets, max amount of tickets you could charge is 9.99, and canceling a space auto refunds. So that goes through the process of doing that, of creating that ticketed space. I might just do a space on just that if people are interested. But we'll it's still early days. They've only released it like in a week's time, in less than a week ago. So, but yeah, it's fascinating. But I'm also fascinated with the audio component, especially from Clubhouse. Do you see something like that in Twitter Spaces? Like, I'm trying to wrap my head around spatial audio for a social audio app where it's almost like a monotone thing. What are your senses for that? Going back to what Clubhouse is doing, do you think something like that in here would help?
That's a good question. I'd like to hear what Suze, because you're more the audio expert, Suze. What do you think of that?
Well, I don't really know. As I say, I've not actually been able to experience it as I thought I might, although perhaps I was trying to listen for like a hard pan left, pan right type experience, which actually I don't think would work. I feel like in Spaces, I'm not sure that it really needs to be there. Potentially, it's just a gimmicky thing. I love fiddling about with audio, and I love knowing that there is a whole world out there of stuff that we can do with it. However, in this situation where we're kind of live streaming, is it really useful? I'm not sure. Perhaps if I could hear it and really feel like I was immersed in that conversation, I would have a different answer.
Yeah, I'd like to hear it in action first and see what it's like before I jump to a conclusion.
Morgan, hello. You have your hand up.
Well, there's something more on spatial audio and then on ticketed spaces. Whether or not it's sort of needed, or it's a thing that Twitter should think about putting out. I kind of feel like, for Twitter's case, it's less important. It's less a thing. I think their developer time could be better spent elsewhere. So the reason Clubhouse was able to do this is that they hired this chap Justin from Google, and he's a world expert in this sort of thing, and he basically tasked himself with 3 months to try and do it. It was a single man effort, a single person effort there. But the other thought is kind of the way the platforms are moving, and it's still early days, but one of the things that spatial audio has helped, which I discovered this morning, was what it does to music. And this is something that is really happening more on Clubhouse. So not only live musicians playing together, but also listening parties and streaming, and there's a gray area here to do with music licensing, which needs to be sorted out. But the platform is being used not only for this, but it's certainly one of the things that's up and coming, is for this sort of immersive kind of soundscape type thing, or a production or a play. I mean, you can imagine a play with a cast and the voices coming from different areas of the room, or just very good quality music. So some of the music that I was listening to this morning that a friend of mine, Tom, was playing on there was fantastic quality. It was a big full soundscape. The record sounded better there than it did when I played the same thing on Spotify later, because Spotify hasn't implemented this. So there's the kind of quality of life improvement as well. And I think one of the interesting things is, what you said, when you used to go on Clubhouse a while ago, the audio quality really wasn't good. Well, I think that's no longer the case, but I also think now that they have this, at least before other platforms do it, and this is a custom implementation, Clubhouse for the first time sounds different. You can listen to it and you know where you are. And so now when I'm on Spaces, I know where I am by how it sounds, as well as the conversation. I think that's really interesting differentiator for them. It doesn't mean that it's something that's very important for all social audio platforms, but there is that, I thought.
Yeah, thanks for sharing your take on that. It's super interesting for sure.
The last thought as well, if I may, on the ticketed spaces thing, and I think this is a general point. I've been, kind of holding Twitter to the fire here over this, because I'm probably one of the ones who make the point that with spaces crashing, or audio glitches, which is getting less common, and they're obviously doing a lot of work to try and help here. But it seems to me quite a kind of aggressive pace to launch ticketed spaces when you're not sure whether your audience and the space is going to survive the show. So I do hope that they can do something in order to do that, to help hosts with that sort of thing. But I think this is also a broader thing about how spaces might crash more gracefully. So as an example, if you schedule a space now and I register for a reminder for that space, but maybe I'm not following the host, if that space crashes shortly after starting, I think all the reminders are then voided. So anyone else who taps on the reminder will then be shown that the space has ended. And if somebody restarts a new space, they've then got to go and look for it. So maybe a way of transferring over all the reminders that people have scheduled to your new space would be something very helpful.
That would be very helpful.
Yeah, and they definitely need to sort that out before the ticketed spaces thing rolls out.
Case in point to what Morgan was talking about. I had tech issues, right? And there's tech issues still that are unresolved. So the tech issue that I'm experiencing just affected me, but just imagine if it's the host and the space crashes and someone just paid whatever it is. That experience of restarting the space, re-inviting the people has to be seamless, because there's already been some people that says, well, I had to refund them and then I have to recharge them, and it's this whole thing. So yeah, it's a very interesting. They need to sort a lot. They need to sort that out, right? Even the re-inviting things. We're getting some of this with third-party data. I think it's cool. So I think some of those things, they don't need to have all the maybe third-party analytics, but some of these things will be essential, like being able to pull all the people that attended the space and give them the option to say, hey, if for whatever reason this, when when you call customer support and the first thing they ask you is like, oh, just in case we get disconnected, what's your number so I could call you back? There should be something like that with when you enter a space. I don't know.
We got one more speaker left. Ella. Hi.
Hi, Madeline. Hi, Suze. Oh, this is just great. I'm really enjoying this. Thank you so much. I'm an avid Clubhouse fan. I'm still using the platform a lot. I say avid. I mean, I'm not using it as much as I was when I joined in January, but I'm still definitely using it, and I've got a club over there and everything else. But I just wanted to add something to what Morgan said. I think it's Morgan about my feeling about Clubhouse is that they are concentrating on this audio sound experience because they're tech guys. That Clubhouse has been set up by tech guys, and they're very concerned about the tech side of Clubhouse. That's where their specialism is. That's where their expertise is. That's where their passion is. And I think a lot of the complaints that there are about Clubhouse, and I do see all of these, they're justified, is they don't really get community. They don't really understand community. So I think they're concentrating on the tech side of things, and that's why they're really kind of, I mean, I go to the town hall pretty much every Sunday, and I hear Paul, one of the founders, getting very excited about what they're doing, and it's great. It's brilliant. They've got the town hall, and I do enjoy listening to the updates. But they they get very excited about the tech side of things, and I understand that because that's where their expertise lies. But I think the whole sort of community thing is where it's still failing a little bit, and that's why people are still not having a lot of people are still not having a positive Clubhouse experience. But that's my perspective on it, and I don't listen to it on headphones, so I can't really say about whether or not my experience of it over the last few days has been improved because of the surround sound introduction. But anyway, thanks very much for letting me speak, Madeline and Suze, and I will definitely join this space again. Thank you very much.
Thanks so much, Ella. That's such a cool kind of observation. And I think you're probably spot on, to be honest.
Yeah, thanks for sharing. Appreciate that. Well, this has been a great hour and 15 minutes of sharing and learning. And gosh, there's always so much to talk about, Suze, every week.
Isn't there? Just absolutely reams of things. And it's so wonderful when we open up the space and get to talk to you all as well. And the conversation just keeps going. So that's really awesome. Thanks so much, everyone that's joined again today. And thanks to those of you who are listening back on the podcast. Yeah, we will be back again next week with more social audio news from all the various platforms on all things audio.
Yeah, we'll be back next week. We'll see you then.